Hello again. Welcome back to the Body Talk podcast. I'm Alina Jenkins, and this is a podcast series where we look at all aspects of communication. And in recent episodes, we've talked about body language, confidence, mindset, storytelling, and conflict resolution. And in this episode, we are going to talk about voice. And your voice is a powerful tool. You can use it to motivate and inspire change in others. When we use our voice well in business, it can help us to connect with our audience and to get our message across with clarity and confidence. And that all sounds great. But I know for some of you listening, you'll be saying, well, Alina, it's all right for you. You come from a broadcasting background, but that's not how I see my voice. And many people that we work with at Body Talk don't like the sound of their own voice. It's a very, very common thing. But also people might feel that they speak too quietly or too quickly or too high, or maybe they have a monotone, dull voice. So if that's you, or if you just like more confidence when you're speaking to an audience, we are here to help. And I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, David Tyler. He is a communication expert, a speaker, a voiceover talent based in Montreal in Canada. He has over 35 years of experience in both TV and radio broadcasting and voiceover. And he does lots of conference speaking, where one of his keynote speeches is about how you can speak to influence. David, welcome along.
Thanks for the invitation, Alina. I really appreciate it.
I am excited to talk to you, David, because we have so much in common. We both come from the world of broadcasting. I'm 22 years. You've got a few years on me. Where did you start your career?
Well, I started right here in Montreal. I was fortunate enough to, while I was still in university, getting my communications degree, to be offered a job at a radio station here in Montreal. Montreal is the second biggest market in Canada, so that's something that's not really a heard of. But I spent, it was about 20, 25 years working in radio. I was offered a job working at Canada's The Weather Network as a weather presenter. I did that for about a year. But I tell people that I got lucky over and over. I never had to go to a smaller town to work in radio or television. So I feel lucky, and I think I am lucky.
Yeah, the thing with radio, David, is that it's very much focused on your voice. That's where I started my broadcasting career, was in local radio, BBC Radio Solent, which is one of the regional stations for the BBC. But very quickly you realise that you have to use your voice in a very particular way. Firstly, you have to be authentic. That's really, really important. But of course, people can only hear you. They can't see you. That all they're listening to is the voice. So what were some of the things that you learnt early on in your broadcasting career when it came to how you use your voice in the best way?
What I learned so many things. I mean, I could give you my 5 tips that I learned along the way in terms of doing voiceover also, and working in broadcasting, if you'd like. It's actually one of the things that I talk about in the seminar that I'm giving. Speak to influence, and I'm speaking with with a lot of business people, not just talking about people who are working in broadcasting, but probably one of the biggest things that the average person forgets about is breathing. So my first tip to having a better voice and becoming more influential is it sounds silly, but it's true. Number one, learn how to breathe. Most people don't even think about it. They just let that part of their brain do that part of the breathing for them. And something that I learned as well, not just in radio, but in doing voiceover. When you're breathing, a lot of people will breathe in through their mouth, and that creates a problem by drying out your vocal cords. I was helping out a speaker. A fellow speaker who, by the end of his 1 hour talk, his voice was severely fatigued. And I asked him, could you do me a favor and focus on your breathing? Focus on your breathing and breathe through your nose. It gives your vocal cords a better chance of surviving. And he started to do that. And you know what? That one thing started to help. When you're giving a speech, when you're speaking in public, breathing is also important in terms of calming you down and relaxing you. The U.S. Marines use the box breathing technique. I don't know if you're familiar with the box breathing technique, Alina, but the box breathing technique, if you imagine a box in front of you and you inhale for 4 seconds across one side of the box, hold your breath for 4 seconds across the top of the box, and exhale through your mouth down the side of the box, and hold that lack of breath for four counts. 4 seconds, however you want to count it. But in doing that, you are learning how to breathe through into your abdomen. But the other thing is that it calms you down. People with anxiety issues, this is a perfect way to alleviate the anxiety before you go and you speak. If you're speaking with a group of people or in front of a stadium, that's my first tip. The second tip is slow down. Most people will get too excited. They have way too much information in their head, and they want to get it all out in one shot. So you know what? Just take your time, say what you need to say, and slow down. The number 3 tip that I've got for you, Alina, is to find the musicality of your voice. Many speakers, non-professional speakers, may speak in a monotone way. But I call it is it the 6? I keep forgetting the count. I think I added one. But the 6 colors of the voice that a voice artist would use. There's pitch, there's pace, there's prosody, there's timbre, tone, and volume. These are all things that you can use if you want to draw people in to something that you're saying. Change the tempo of what you're saying, and change the volume too. If you really want somebody to pay attention to what you're saying, you can use all of those things. So the pitch sometimes helps. The pace, the prosody being the poetry of what it is that you're saying, the timbre and the tone. Some people speak a little too high and they get a little bit nasally with their tone, but be aware of those things. And of course, volume can be an issue also if you're speaking a little too loudly in certain conditions. How are we doing so far? That's 3 out of 5 tips. The fourth one. So the fourth one is the biggest one, and I learned this by reading. I forget what it was, a psychology magazine or something. Number 4, resonance communicates confidence. When you have a resonant tone, it communicates confidence to your audience that you know what it is that you're talking about, and I call it the MRP, your maximum resonance point, the maximum resonance point of your voice. You need to find that. I actually have a video that's online. It's on Vimeo. It's training more for my voice acting students to find what their MRP is using a piano, and I could share that link with you also so that you can share it with your audience. But find your maximum resonance point. When you speak like this, you are more likely to be listened to, but even more importantly, you're more likely to be heard. So resonance communicates confidence. And my 5th tip, be quiet. Sometimes you need to say nothing. A very good friend of mine, Nick Michaels, who's passed away. He spent a lot of time working in radio. He happens to actually be here from Montreal as well. And Nick Michaels, he was speaking about doing commercial voiceover and voiceover for television. And he said that when you add that white space, that white noise, what the white space is, you're inviting the audience in to participate in what most likely is a monologue. But if you don't leave that white space, you make your audience a victim of your message. So my 5th tip is to be quiet and let the audience with their thoughts. Let the audience think about what it is that you've just said, and let them participate in what you're saying, even if they're not speaking out loud. That's 5, I think.
Yeah, we call it yes, no, they're fantastic. And we call it the power of the pause, actually, as well, that idea of silence. And because when you create that silence, what you're doing is you're giving your words space, right, and it makes them important. When we give things space, it makes them look much more important. We often use the analogy of the Mona Lisa. If anybody's ever been to the Louvre in Paris, which I went there in November, and you're in this room where the Mona Lisa is, and there's loads of paintings on all the other walls, beautiful, priceless paintings. But the Mona Lisa is on her own with loads of space around them. She's very small. But what they're saying is that this person is important. This painting is important. We've given it space. And I think it's the same with our words. That idea of pause is that you give your words power and you give them importance. I wanted to come back to your first tip, actually, that you mentioned, David, which is about breathing, because all of this is tied in. And you mentioned anxiety. So I'm sure you coach people in your world, as we do, who this the very thought of having to stand and talk to people with all eyes on them just sends their blood pressure through the roof.
Sure, I think the statistic is people would rather die than speak in public. I think that's the actual statistic. I don't know what the numbers are, but yeah.
I've read as well that if you think about phobias, that social phobias, including, speaking in front of people, tops everything, tops spiders, heights, all of those things. So people don't like it.
Yeah, what's up with that? I don't know. Because you and I are both working in broadcasting, it's like, why? Right?
Yeah. Although I'd be interested, actually, I'm going slightly off on a tangent. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, David, because I still do some work for the BBC and I do some live broadcasts of where there are 17 million people watching. And even though I've been doing it for years and years, there's still that, I can feel the heart rate starting to go. And I just wondered if you ever still get that when you're on stage, you've maybe got hundreds, maybe thousands of people watching you. Do you still have that moment of adrenaline?
Of course I do. I'm having it right now. I don't think I've ever done an interview on camera before, so I have a little bit of it now. I think that because I was also a musical performer from before the time that I got into radio. I think it's important to be nervous, and what I suggest to people who I'm coaching in terms of public speaking is to memorize the first 2 minutes of whatever it is that you're going to say. Just memorize the first 2 minutes, because usually by the time that you get up onto the stage and you get through the first 2 minutes, your whole body has calmed down. You're less anxious. You know where you're going. You've made that initial connection with your audience, because they usually make a decision about you, about who you are, within the first 5 or 10 seconds. So you get past that, and then you can get into the material that you know well. As long as you remember the first 2 minutes. But I think that it's important to have that. It's what gives you an edge, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I often say to our clients, I say, don't be afraid of nerves. Nerves, I think, mean that you care, mean you want to do well. And if I think of some of the things that I've done over my career, when I've got in with this kind of slightly nonchalant attitude, it's fine. That tends to be when I fall over. Not literally, but perhaps I stumble over my words or make mistakes. So I say, nerves mean you care. And we also as well say, if you think about maybe when you're excited, it's the same feeling. So it's a mindset shift, isn't it? This idea of I'm not nervous, I'm excited. But we were talking, we managed to go off on a tangent. I knew we would today. We were talking about breathing, and I love that box idea, which I think we talked about on a previous. Yes, we've talked about on a previous podcast around sort of mindset and confidence. So how do you control your breath when you are in the middle of a speech? Because the trouble is that we can give all this advice about, remember what you're going to say before, practice what you're going to do, go in so that you're calmer. But something will happen and you'll think, I haven't got a room of happy nodders. Everybody's looking at me very seriously. And the inner critic starts to get the better of you. And so that you feel yourself tensing up. So have you got any thoughts of sort of controlling your breathing actually in the moment?
I think that we could go to the number 2, and that is to slow down. If something goes wrong and you start hearing that inner critic voice, slow down. And it's okay to stop, to pause, and do a couple of rounds of that breathing. Maybe not full 4 seconds, but it's okay to stop. People are going to pay attention to you. And it's also okay, because we talked about authenticity and being authentic. This is 2022. It's not the 1970s or the 80s where people are expecting you to be polished. They don't want you to be polished. They want you to be real. They want you to be authentic. So in that moment, when you're on the stage and you feel like you're losing control of the audience, take a pause, continue, slow down, and you may even want to say something like, wow, things aren't going the way that I thought they'd be going. And people will connect with you on that level, on that, yeah, I've been there before. I've been there where I forgot what it was that I was saying. Me, I forget what I'm saying a lot of the time. But it's important to be authentic because you will connect with your audience. You've been an audience member, and I've been an audience member. And when somebody comes up on the stage, I'm not right away judging and saying, hey, this guy is terrible. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not thinking about that. You want to know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about, I hope this guy does well. I want to learn something from him. I'm here to learn. And that's where understanding your audience better is going to help you when you're presenting in front of an audience. Okay, so here's an audience. Here's whatever, 100 people, 1,000 people, doesn't matter. What do they want? What do they expect from this talk that I'm about to give? They want to learn to be a better speaker, so that they could be more powerful and have more influence others. When you understand what it is that your audience is there for, that's going to also help you to stay focused and not lose control. Losing control is not a strong word, but to go back to your point, what happens when the inner critic starts coming out, or you forget what it was that you were saying? Just remember what the audience is there for, and be authentic. Yeah. It's a perfect opportunity to show your authenticity.
Yeah, and I really like that idea of being authentic, of perhaps being vulnerable. And you picked up on a point that, how things have changed a lot over the last 20 or 30 years. And I think about the BBC, which is, it's a UK organisation, but it's a global organisation. If you say the word BBC, people all around the world will know it. And if you look at the BBC, 40 or 50 years ago, it was very stiff and very wooden. You daren't make a mistake. And, particularly as a woman, I might have found it very hard 40 or 50 years ago to make my mark in broadcasting. But certainly what's happened both in broadcasting, but also in the way that we communicate over the last 20 years, which I like a lot, is that it's all right to make a mistake. It's all right to be yourself. Certainly here in the UK, 30 years ago, if you had a regional accent, you would never have got on the TV. Maybe 40 years, maybe not 30 years. And that's all changed now. You're gaining all these different regional accents. So I think this idea of authenticity and being vulnerable and not worrying about making mistakes takes a lot of pressure off of ourselves, doesn't it?
That's right. Exactly. Authenticity is key. I mean, the fact that you asked me if I still get anxious, and I said I'm anxious right now. I'm being authentic with you. I'm being authentic with your audience. I'm in an unusual position to be interviewed in this way, but still, I think I know what I'm talking about. So we're okay.
I think you're doing a great job. I wanted to chat to you. You mentioned resonance.
Yes. And
I'd love just to kind of delve more into that. And you talked about
right.
kind of like musicality. Mm-hmm. So let's just expand a little bit more on the resonance idea.
Okay. How would you like me to expand? Everybody has a resonance point in their voice. Everybody does. I think that the myth is that only men have a resonant voice. You have a resonant voice. Your resonant tone, your maximum resonance point to your voice is higher than mine. Your vocal cords are shorter. When I went through puberty, my vocal cords extended a lot. And so it gives me a lower tone of voice. Now, I forgot her name, and I probably should have written it down, because a very good example of someone is the CEO of a pharmaceutical company, and I can't remember, and I'll think of it later probably, she was given some bad advice. And somebody told her that she should speak like this, because then people will take her more seriously. So she wasn't speaking in her resonant voice. She was speaking in a deeper voice. And so therefore she actually lost her company. Her whole company went bankrupt. Is it the reason because of that? No, there was probably some other business ideas as well. But she was given misinformation that speaking in a lower voice is what will make people pay more attention to you. However, if she had spoken in her resonant tone, in her resonant voice, which is, again, like I said, higher than mine and not down here, she probably would have been taken more seriously. So it's important to find out where that tone is, and where it isn't. One of the things I've worked with a lot of women in terms of creating that resonance tone. Now here in North America, I don't want to put ideas about the UK, but I'm specifically speaking about in North America. Women, again, I'm in general, are taught from childhood to be it's a terrible word, but subservient, and in order to be that, they need to speak a little bit higher. They need to speak north of where their resonant tone is, so that people aren't too offended by when they speak. They need to be soft. So one of the things that I do with the women that I work with is to bring their voice down, to find their resonant tone and teach them to speak from that tone. If you want to be taken seriously, if you want to create change and you're a female CEO, you need to find your resonance tone, because speaking up here is, it's kind of like, I really don't know what I'm talking about. But would you mind if perhaps you're not going to become the CEO of any company speaking like that. That's number one. Number two is what I call the female voice deferring to authority. And that is by ending off every single sentence, no matter what is it they're talking about, to end it off as if they're speaking, it's a question. Because again, they don't want to be too offensive. They don't want to offend. And that's another thing that we need to that women need to work on in terms of creating that kind of impactful voice, finding their resonance point, and getting rid of this upturn, this up curl. And I know that you're going to have to help me with this, Alina, because there is an accent in the UK where everybody, it seems, from a North American point of view, has an accent, and it's a little bit of a lilt. Where is it an Irish accent? I'm not sure, but there's a tone
Welsh, perhaps,
where everybody speaks like this.
Yeah, so Welsh. Yeah, perhaps Welsh. I know, certainly from a global perspective, it's quite common in Antipodean countries. So South Africa, okay. Australia, New Zealand tend to go up at the end of the sentence. But yes, I think in people in Wales tend to do it as well. And you're right. It's people don't even realise they're doing it.
That exactly. So, somebody, if you're saying it's a Welsh accent, if somebody from Wales came to North America and was speaking in perfect English, even with a nice resonant tone, but if they keep putting that curly Q at the end, the North American ear is going to hear somebody who's deferring authority, I'm giving authority up to you. I know that. When my kids my children are in their 20s now, but when they were smaller, you speak differently. It's about understanding your audience to make sure that they understand what it is that you're trying to say. I agree. But in a business atmosphere, you need to speak with confidence, and you're gonna be able to do that from your resonant tone. And women, and men do it also. By the way, I was watching a documentary the other day, and this man was doing it. I was like, oh my God, that's weird. But here in North America, like I said, women seem to have been trained or taught to not be offensive and speak that way, defer authority. But resonance is a very important part of that.
And you mentioned something about playing the piano or using the piano to find your resonance tone. So how do you do that?
Well, I don't have my piano is over there, and it's not it's electric, and it's not turned on. But it's a matter of you don't need to be singing. You don't need to be a singer. And in the video, I explain it very clearly. You start from middle C, and you sing as high as you can go with your voice, and you sing as low as you can go with your voice. And then the number of white keys that you have there, there's oh my God, it's multiplication. It's a mathematical equation, but it sits about in terms of the range. My maximum resonance point, my MRP, is about 1/4 from the bottom of the full range of my voice. And if I was to speak in my resonant tone in a monotone way, that's not good enough. You need to find the musicality of your voice. But if the tonic, if the point where you begin speaking is there in your resonance tone, that's what's going to create the respect for you and for the message. I'll send you the video later.
Yeah.
I'll send you the video.
Yeah, please do. And by the way, we'll put it in on our website. So if anybody's listening and wants to go and find it, it'll be on our website where this podcast lives, or the video part of it lives.
Okay.
And also what you're saying is we talk about this in our training as well. Is not what you've just said there. That's great. Really, lovely, different point of view. But if you think about how we've evolved as humans, is that when we hear a high voice, is we generally associate that with youth, children, for example. Our children will speak in a really, really high way. And I was watching some old videos that we made. My son's also in his 20s. So we were watching the baby videos that we just digitized. And so we're listening, my husband and I, listening to ourselves speak on the video. And we've just realized both of our voices have dropped a lot, particularly my husband's as well, which is interesting for men. So this idea that as we get older, our voices get lower. So we associate the lower notes with age and wisdom, which is the point you're making, really, David, isn't it? Is that
Correct.
when you're hearing those high notes, we don't trust you as much, perhaps.
That's right. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, but yeah, absolutely. A voice of authority is an older, wiser voice, and I guess would tend to be that lower resonant tone. There were some psychological studies that were done that in a group of people who were standing around, the one who had the most resonant voice, the most resonant tone, was automatically the leader of the group. And that's where I started looking at this idea of resonance and why resonance is so important to the voice, and came up with that idea that resonance communicates confidence. The more resonant tone you can have in your voice, the better that it is. I work for one of my clients is CTV, which is it's a private broadcaster across Canada. We've got a 24-hour news channel, affiliates. I think we have 16 affiliates across the country, and I'm the voice of the news. So I'm the voice of CTV News. And I've been doing that for about 8 years. Went through about 8 weeks of auditions to get that voice, to get that job. And I continue to do work in the United States also for television, where, yes, I'm doing news promos, etc. But it's that voice of my voice that they've identified as a voice of authority. So when it comes to the news, they want to have me on the news channel. So that's a practical example of how a resonant voice communicates confidence or assuredness that you would want to have in the news.
Yes. Yeah, I think also having to do the news, because one of my first jobs as a radio presenter at BBC Radio Solent, at first I did the travel, and then they let me loose on the early morning show, and eventually they let me loose on the news as well, which was
Wow.
That was a big learning curve for me, because again, people can only hear you, and so yes, you have to have resonance, you have to have authority, particularly for the first couple of stories, because generally they're the serious ones. Mm-hmm. But what you also have to do, and it's the same for business as well, is this is where you have to bring the variety, because you don't want to be talking about, I was local radio, so you don't want to be talking about the village fair in your very slow and serious voice. So it's about congruency, isn't it? And you mentioned this earlier, getting your pitch right, depending on what your message is. And you must be an expert at that. I know you are, because of all your years. But how do you switch? How do you think, right, okay, this is the message. How do I want the audience to feel about it?
How do I do that? Well, I think that because I never did the news, I never did a news broadcast in that sense. On the Weather Network, we did have a 5-minute newscast, but we were just talking about the weather and different things that are happening in the news. But perhaps a better way of talking about that is through commercial voiceover. where when I worked in radio, I would finish off my shift and I would have maybe 10 or 15 different commercials, all with different ideas, thoughts, selling different products and different attitudes in the presentation of that information. So that's really where I learned how to dial it up or down or sideways or wherever it needed to be, just by understanding the script. And when I'm coaching the voice talent, I say, you want to know what you need to do first, because usually they'll give you specs. They'll say, we want somebody who's young, et cetera, et cetera. I said, don't read the specs, read the script. And if the commercial starts off with the word yo, what's going on? You know right away, just by that they want somebody who sounds youthful. So right away you can click into what that is. The words could be, when I was a child, now that I'm a grandfather, things like that. So you know automatically that you're going to have to tune in that kind of a voice. If you're a business owner and you're standing in front of 100 people that work for you, and you have bad news, you can't come out and say, "Hey guys, how's it going? Everything is great here today." Yes. So listen, I want to tell you that we have to fire half of you. You can't do that. A sociopath might do that, but you need to understand the context of what the message is. I talk about the connection triad. To create connection. The ultimate goal of any kind of communication that we have is to create connection between people. And in order to do that, you need to understand three things, the triad. You need to understand the messenger. You need to understand who you are, what your perspective is, what your point of view is. You need to understand your audience as well, and what their wants and needs are. And then number three, you need to understand what the message is. I call it message craft. You need to understand those three things. When you can fully understand those three things in the triad, you will create connection. So, and like I said, that's the ultimate goal, is to create connection between people. That's the only reason why we communicate. We're talking about the 70s and the 80s. I got into radio in the late 80s, but I remember how things were back then as a listener. It was the radio station. We have all of the information, and you are slaves to us. So I am giving you a communication. Here's communication. This is what's happening. Here's what's happening. It was a very dominant way of communicating with an audience. Things have changed a lot. Social media, for example, or socialized media, for example. So they couldn't do that anymore. And they had to really think about how was it that we are going to connect with our audience to create a community. And broadcasting changed in that way as well. And here we are in 2022 talking about, it's okay to make mistakes because it tells people that you are indeed an authentic person, and create that kind of a connection with your audience.
Yeah, you mentioned something. I was looking at your website, David, is that, of course, nowadays everyone's a broadcaster because they've got a smartphone and they can go on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. You are straight away, you've got all the kit you need to broadcast. This didn't exist even 10 years ago, not quite, certainly when I started broadcasting. So, broadcasters were seen as, the experts, and hopefully we still are. But now everyone is a broadcaster. But what you've said in the blog is it's all very well. You can have the equipment. There's all this great stuff, but what you just mentioned there's that craft that's underneath it, and having just a little bit of awareness, authenticity, absolutely very, very important. And I think this is why people love social media, because it's just somebody in the moment. But if you can maybe think about the craft a little bit more,
right,
would that perhaps give you an edge in your social media videos?
Right, exactly. I can't remember which article you're talking about. What I was talking specifically about was crafting your message. Because a lot of people can broadcast. They could they do it all the time on social media. Here I am live having dinner. Great. Why should I care? What is the message that you're saying? You're saying that it could be that, hey, this is the first time that I've gone out in the last 2 years because of confinement. So this is very exciting. Okay, that's the message. It's not about what it is that you're eating. Understand what the message is. People believe or I should say broadcasters believe, a lot of them still believe, that when you create a 30-second commercial and you put it on the radio in a commercial break that's 4 minutes long, they think people are going to listen to their message. They're not going to listen to their message, because they're driving down the highway of life at 100 kilometers an hour, and you're sticking a billboard up that they're going to see for 5 seconds. And if you catch their attention, then they'll look a little more deeply at it. You need to create that connection within the first 5 seconds. We're talking about doing commercials. You need to capture their attention within the first 5 seconds. Otherwise, they will dismiss your message completely. But it's about message craft, creating the message that you want to send to your audience. Again, we're not just talking about creating commercials, but speaking, about business leaders who want to get the attention of their staff. If you call a meeting, people are going to be there. They're going to give you a little more than 5 seconds. I would hope they would give you more than 5 seconds to get your message out. But you really need to understand what your message is. And my message is, stop communicating and start connecting.
I really like that. It's so powerful, and also what you were just saying there ties back into the voice. Is that you sometimes do only have 5 or 10 seconds to get someone's attention, hopefully a little bit more in a meeting, but let's be generous. Let's say you've got a minute. Most people, as you said earlier, warm up after about 2 minutes. About 2 minutes in, they're like, all right, I'm in the flow now. But if you've started off quietly stumbling and not using your voice in the best way, people will switch off. So we often say to people, go in with the maximum amount of energy, not shouting, obviously. Within that first 30 seconds, go in with all guns blazing. Don't feel that it's all right to warm up. Would you agree with that? Is that you just got to go in and get their attention in that first 30 seconds?
Yeah,
with the way that you use your voice.
I did top 40 radio here in Montreal, and we only had seconds. So yeah, you had to go in. You had to go in top heavy. You had to give the headline first, and not in reverse. If I remember right from my journalism friends, when you're writing an article, it's the inverted pyramid, right? I think that's what they called it, the inverted pyramid. And yeah, when you're going into to speak to your employees or whoever in a meeting, you need to do that inverted pyramid. What's the headline? This is a good question. If you're giving bad news, if there's bad news, we're going to have to lay off half of you. Do you want to lead? Do you want to slowly get into that, or do you just want to start with that? Do you want to rip off the Band-Aid, or take it off slowly? People are sitting there waiting. So I think that the inverted pyramid, if I'm using the term correctly, somebody's going to correct me. A journalist will. But if you use that, that method, I think, yes, I definitely agree with you. But like I said before, know what you want to say. Have it fairly memorized what you're going to say for the first 2 minutes.
Yeah. Brilliant tips and advice, David. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting with you today. So thank you for your time. I think perhaps we need to get you back and talk about some other things. So I know you
Sure.
do you do other keynote speeches as well. It's
Correct.
not just about voice, but also around other aspects of communication.
Yes.
So you mentioned before, stop communicating, start connecting. So perhaps we'll come back and do another podcast on that one.
I think, Alina, that would be fantastic. I have so much to say. I have so much to share. So anytime you want to talk again, just let me know.
Well, fellow broadcasters as well. We could just keep chatting for ages. David, really great to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone at home listening. We'll be back again with another episode of the Body Talk podcast very soon. Take care. Bye bye.